All right, now we're recording. So for this lesson, we'll basically be going over like basic how to use objects in Java and stuff like that. So we'll be talking about like what objects are and what like classes and instances are. And also I'll be going over two pretty basic classes in Java that you'd find pretty helpful. So first off, what is an object? An object is basically like, it's just a thing in Java that's kind of separate from the concept of a variable. So like a variable holds a value, but object is kind of like an object in real life. So like a bottle or just like a thing. It's basically an instance of a class. So class is kind of like a blueprint on how you can like make an object, like what this object does, what information can it hold, and the object is like an actual instance of that class. So I guess the best way to put it is like, for example, if you look down below, you have something like a class can be a fruit or a book, and the objects would be like apple, oranges, and bananas, and a book would be like Jane Eyre or like The Great Gatsby or like The Hunger Games. So like the classes sort of describe like what an object can do and what sort of stuff it has. So like another example would be a class can be like a dog, and the object would be like a puppy or something like that. So a dog can bark. They can have like different colored fur, and then like the puppy in real life would be like the instance of a dog that would actually like bark, and you can actually see the color of its fur. So something like that. And then in Java, like you can create objects by, let me move this upwards. You can create objects by just doing like class name equals new class. And then you have to have like the parentheses at the end. So for example, you can have something like fruit apple equals new fruit, or book Jane Eyre equals new book. So the most important thing is like, just like with variables, so like this part is the variable. So you have like the class that describes its type. So like the variable apple is of type fruit. But this second part is how you're instantiating that object. So it would equal a new fruit. Any questions about this so far? Okay. And
I have one real quick.
Sure.
So down where it has like book, Jane Eyre, new book, there's so Jane Eyre up top is capitalized in space and is one word with just lowercase in the down there. Do you not use the space when you're doing a new class, or?
So basically, for when it comes to like naming variables in Java, you can't have any spaces in your names. So it has to be all one word, and you can like have different capitalizations. So like the E is capitalized or something like that. As long as it's one word, then it's a proper variable name. So that's why we have the space missing in Jane Eyre. Technically for variables, you can like capitalize them however you want. So like the J could have been capitalized. But in Java, it's usually good practice to have your variable name start in lowercase and then your class name start with uppercase. Does that clear enough?
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. And if you guys have like any other questions, or like you kind of want me to go over this, or you're not like sure or like you're not really getting what I'm talking about, feel free to like tell me to like go back, or just drop any questions. All right, so next slide. So basically why I'm talking a lot about like objects and stuff is I'm trying to get to sort of like object-oriented programming. So object-oriented programming is basically a type of program you can do that's structured around objects and classes. So if you've looked through like the workshops and all the demos we did last class, you'll notice that literally everything in Java is structured around objects and classes. So like even your main method is in a class and it's like part of the main class and things like that. So Java is like a really good language to learn OOP or object-oriented programming because everything about it is centered around objects and classes. It's also on the slide there's also like procedural programming, and that's basically just saying like all the basically all the stuff you do in Java is operated on by methods. So like it's basically Java is a language that's structured around like making methods and like passing data into it. You don't have to worry too much about like knowing exactly what like procedural programming is. It's more that you should understand that OOP is a way of programming where you have like concepts like objects and classes, and basically a lot of what you'll do in Java is basically creating new classes, passing around objects, and just like manipulating those to make a program. And yeah, like again, in OOP, like objects can contain data and methods. So basically, in your classes, you can have both like different types of data, like, oh, what if I have a class dog, like what color is the fur, what's the dog's name, stuff like that. But you can also have methods like a dog can bark, a dog can run, and whatnot. All right, so any questions? All right, so next, I'll just be going over like the 4 basic concepts of OOP. You don't really have to understand exactly what this is right now. These are a little bit like advanced, but just like keep these in mind as you're learning Java. So basically the 4 pillars of OOP are abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. Abstraction is basically you only want to show the user the stuff that they need to know. So like the general rule that goes with this is like try to keep your data as private as possible. You don't want people like accidentally manipulating or accessing methods that they shouldn't have access to. So all users should only be able to see the stuff that they need to know. Encapsulation is basically hiding sensitive data from users, so like making things private. And inheritance is basically like it's basically like subclasses and superclasses. So like superclasses can inherit, or subclasses can inherit methods and data from like superclasses and whatnot. And then finally, polymorphism is the ability for an object to basically take different forms. So it's kind of like grouping different objects that have like similar features together. So for example, a cat and a dog are both types of animals, but and they can like both make noises, right? Except a cat can like meow, but a dog can bark. These are a little bit like these are a little bit complicated if you don't understand classes and stuff. So like right now, I would say like have these in mind, know that they exist, but we'll definitely explain it, or you'll understand it a lot better once we get into the later parts of this course. So like by like near the end of the course, you should be able to understand it. But right now, like don't worry if it's going a little over your head. Just know that like these 4 concepts exist. And then this one is also pretty important. So like so basically Java is a pass by value language. And there's a difference between pass by reference and pass by value. So pass by reference is basically like you pass in the reference of an object. So a reference is like It's basic. The PowerPoint says it's like a set of directions to somewhere in the memory, but it's a lot simpler than that. It's basically a reference is something that points to somewhere in memory. So let me see if I can draw this out. So last class we talked about how variables for primitives store numbers, right? But when it comes to like reference objects, you have instead of storing numbers, they store addresses. So let me see. Can you guys see like what I'm drawing on here?
Yes.
Sweet. So basically, when you have a variable, let's say I have a variable called A. If I assign it to a primitive type, so like A int A equals 1, A will hold just the value 1. But what Java does is basically if I have a class A, so instead of int, I have a class like dog A equals new dog. Instead of having like A stored dog in here, what it'll do is it'll do something like it'll point to an object called dog. So it will store like if dog was stored in the address like 0101, it'll store the address over here and it'll just point to dog. So that's what they're talking about in these slides when it's like about references. Basically, when we have like, how do I clear this? Or when we have like code like this, so fruit apple equals new fruit. And it's basically saying that for reference variables, the apple is basically pointing to the fruit object. Does anyone have any questions about that? Because I know that can be a little confusing.
So like,
yep.
Let me get this straight. A reference is passing by reference is where you type a class or any other reference like a string, and it gets another object and it types it gets the information of that object into this one, and the value is just I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm confused.
It's all good. Yeah. So basically, what I'm talking about is sort of like Java has two types of data. So last class we talked about primitive types, right? They're basically like integers, doubles, booleans, and characters. They're all like values that can be stored as numbers. So like you can have an integer 2 or like a double 3.5. But another type in Java is called a reference type. And that's sort of what I'm trying to get at here. So like a reference type is everything else. Everything else in Java is basically like pointing to a different object. So like a dog or something like that. Basically, when it comes to pass by reference, basically what I talked about is sort of like what a reference is. A reference is sort of like a variable that points to like a different object. So if I have fruit apple equals new fruit, In memory, what that'll look like is that I have this variable called apple, but it points to the actual like fruit object that's supposed to be referring to. And the difference in that is, sorry, you got a question?
It's okay.
Okay, like feel free, if this is sort of confusing, like feel free to just interrupt and ask.
Well, so basically what I understood from that is the reference are like everything else, like the strings and classes, they point to another object. However, the values, what I understood from that, they just store a value inside, just a value inside of them without pointing in any direction.
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, what I'm getting at is sort of like, just like you said, like references point to like a different part of memory. So what they actually like, they're technically their value would be like whatever like memory address that fruit is at. But like you can basically think about as apple is pointing to the fruit object. On the other hand, like there are primitive values. Like if I have like Boolean x equals true. What this stores is basically I'll have a variable x, but instead of pointing to anything, it'll actually store like a true value, so a 1.
So what's the difference between a value and a primitive?
A primitive is just like a type of value. So a primitive is just like any value that can be represented by a number. So like,
yep. So like Booleans would be 1 or 0, then there's int, double, float.
Yep. So exactly. So primitives are types of values that can be basically directly translated into numbers. So like, just like you said, true and false can be 1 and 0. Characters can be like any number on the ASCII table. And then like integers, doubles, like those are actually numbers. But on the other hand, how Java stores like classes and objects is they can't store the class and object directly into the variable. They can only store the address of where that class is in memory. So basically, they just point to where that object is, and that's all they can do. So that basically relates to pass by reference in that like when you pass in like the idea of pass by reference is when you pass in the reference to like a method, you're passing in like the actual address of wherever that object is. But on the other hand, when you pass by value, when you pass in like the data into like the method, it will actually make a copy of that value into another place in memory. So you technically won't be like affecting the original variable. This can be like a little confusing to like explain just by words. So like hopefully like this GIF at the bottom helps, where it's like when you're passing by reference, you actually pass in the actual like object itself. But when you pass by value, you actually make a copy of that object and then pass the copy in. Anyone have like any other questions about that? Or like you want me to sort of clarify anything? Sweet. All right, so next we can talk a little bit about like specific objects and classes that you can use in Java. So the first one, the most common one, is string objects. So strings are they're objects, and they basically are a sequence of characters. So words. They all have like, you can access their attributes using string.attribute, and you can access the list of methods using string.method. Basically, if you want to access, the general rule is if you want to access information to like an object, you have to put the dot, and then you can like put a variable name or like a method name, and then that'll be basically accessing that specific variable or method. Just remember for methods, you have to like have the parentheses at the end so you can call the method. Just like with other classes, you can make a new string using like string name equals new string, and you can also input like whatever text you want. So just be aware, like for if you want to like create a new string that's like a specific word, make sure you surround the word with double parentheses. Yeah, and it's not exactly recommended because you're basically like you can basically create copies of like the same string. So in this example, you have like string A equals new string ABCD, string B equals new string ABCD. However, A would not equal B. And basically the idea is sort of like, it's exactly what I talked about in the last slide. So basically you have like, they have A is pointing to A, B, C, D, this string in memory. However, like if you like do another string B equals new string A, B, C, D, B is pointing to another string A, B, C, D that's in like a separate part of memory. So when you do this A equals B, they're actually comparing the values of A and B. So say like this ABCD is in the memory address like 1, and this one is in 1, 1. So the value of A over here would be 1 because it stores the address of this first string object. The value of B would be 1, 1 because it stores the address of this second string object. So they technically wouldn't be equal. So anyone have like questions about that? The better way to just make a string would like the same idea would just to be like string A equals A, B, C, D. So it's just like how you would instantiate like a primitive type. You would just have, it's just like a character with, but like you put it around double quotes instead, and you use the string type. And sometimes like people get it confused because like it's so easy to create a string like this that they'll think it's a primitive, but this is still technically the same idea as this string A equals new string ABCD. So there is a way to sort of create strings without having to use this. But just remember, like the same thing would apply that like A would not equal B because they're two different objects. And yeah, this is the way of making that would just be like that. That way of making a string is just called using like creating a string literal. So yeah, Java automatically just keeps these strings in this like they keep a lot of objects in this place called the heap in memory, and they also do a lot of like fancy stuff with strings specifically that'll make it kind of work like a primitive. And then these are just a list of different string methods that you can use. So the first one is just getting a substring. If we have this string called like hello, hi equals hello, making a substring would just be like getting one part of that string. So it would be this line would just be getting like the first two characters of a string, so H and E. If you guys are familiar with array indexing, basically the places in strings start at 0. So the first like letter of a string would be like the 0th letter in a sense. Any questions about that? All right. So just remember that it basically gets everything like starting from the first index all the way up until, but not including the second parameter. And then you can also do like to uppercase, which will make everything capitalized. There's also another method called to lowercase, which will lowercase everything. You can, if you want to like actually check string quality, I would really recommend you check like use this dot equals method. So actually for all your objects, you should have a method called dot equals, and it will actually check for the value equality of the object. So if we go back here, if we, instead of using like a equals b, we use a dot equals b, it'll actually return like the correct thing, that these two strings are like technically equal, like they have the same letters basically. So it's good practice to use dot equals instead of like equals equals for any sort of objects that you have. Second is dot length, which is just the length of the string. And then finally, index of, which is the index of like whatever substring you pass in. So in this example, you have like index of EL. It'll return the first occurrence of like EL in the string in hello, and then it'll return 1 because E is the first index, or it's the character, or E is at the first index of the string. Any questions about this? All right. So the next object we're going to be going over is the random object. So this will help you basically generate random objects. So you can generate like random like decimals or like random integers, stuff like that. So just be sure if you're using a random class, or like for like most classes that you'll have to like refer to, you have to import it first at the very top of your code. So for a random object, you have to type in import java.util.random at the very beginning of your code. It's like basically this, it'll tell Java like, hey, I'm using this random class, and you're basically giving the compiler the blueprint to like, this is what the class does. This is like all the methods the class has, basically. So you can basically use it in sort of like the same fashion as this example. So like you can do like random dot next in to like get the next random integer. So just like the first thing you have to do is like create a new random object, and then next would just be like calling next in, and then it'll take in like the sort of maximum integer that you want. Yep, and like here are like just two methods you can that would be pretty helpful. So like next int would take in like would basically give you a random integer. If you give it like a maximum value, it'll basically take everything from 0 up to but not including the number you pass in. And then for next double, it'll basically give you a random decimal between 0 and 1. All right, so the last class we're going to be talking about are scanners. So scanners are basically how you're gonna basically take in user input. So again, just like with random classes, make sure you write import java.util.scanner on the top of your Java code, so that Java will know like what you're using. And yeah, so the general thing is just like you declare a new scanner object and you create a new scanner. Make sure you pass in system.in. So system.in will basically, there's a lot. Basically, it'll tell you that you're using sort of the standard system input. There's a lot of things with like Java streams and stuff, but basically every time you pass in a new scanner, you have to pass in a system.in within like the constructor. So basically every time you create a new scanner, make sure like you're using this line specifically. Otherwise it might get a little sketchy. And then basically a scanner will you can call like the method called like next line, which will get like the next line the user enters. Yep, so let me see if I can sort of demo this. So basically for scanners, what you can do is like, the general rule is like scanner, my scanner. You'll have to basically pass in, you'll basically create a new scanner by like declaring a scanner variable that stores a new scanner that holds this system.in. So make sure like you have this line first, so create the scanner object. Next would be like my scanner. You can call like this method myScanner.nextLine, which will basically get the next line, the scanner inputs. And it'll basically return something called a string. It'll return a string. So you can do like string A equals myScanner.nextLine. And then we can try printing that out. Yeah, you'll basically have to just memorize this line first. Once we get to like creating your own classes and stuff, and we'll talk about constructors and like and all that, this will kind of make a little more sense. But for now, just like memorize this. So this is basically what you have to do. So then if we run this, wrong library. It'll first print out hello world, then it'll create a new scanner, and next line will basically be like Java sitting here just waiting for me to input the next line. So I can do like a next line like this, and when I press enter, next line will basically store all that information into string, and then Java will just print it back out. Any questions about this?
Yeah, I have a question. So you put string right in line 8.
Yeah.
Why didn't you import the string? Because you said it was necessary. So why did it work?
So basically, the reason that your code was probably breaking when you were using this new string method was that Java was trying to find like the string constructor, but it couldn't because you didn't import like the string class itself. The reason that this works is that instead of using the string class directly, I'm basically using this string literal method, where instead of like doing like new string ABCD, I'm just like storing it directly as like double quotes ABCD.
So if you're doing string A equals ABCD, then you don't need to import it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because Java doesn't need to, basically the compiler doesn't need to go like, oh, what's this new method? And then freak out when it can't find that method, basically.
Okay.
Sweet. So the next thing we're going to do is just questions, but just like practice questions. But if you guys have any sort of questions about like what we talked about this class and even like what we talked about last class, feel free to ask.
So could we actually go through a little bit of stuff from last week? Because I couldn't even really get it started to work. And I don't know if it's just because they walked through Replit too quickly and I'm not familiar with it, or what the situation was.
Okay.
Just dumb.
So you want to go through the workshop from last class?
Yeah, like just like one or two of them to sort of see how to set it up, like if I was doing something wrong or.
Yeah, let me just quickly pull up the workshop. So
I can link mine if you need, or.
sure.
Let me-
If you're comfortable with like all of us seeing your code.
Yeah, I don't care.
Okay. Sweet, thanks. All right, so I'm just gonna take a walk through the code. Basically, the idea was to just get you guys comfortable with just like declaring variables and stuff. So yeah, the basically just like knowing to like be able to go through this, you have to just be familiar with like what like the primitive types we went over were, and sort of when should you use them and how can you declare them. So for this first part, I'm seeing we have the first part, if I remember correctly, is that we want you to declare like a variable called numrocks and then instantiate it. So this is correct. So you can do like int numrocks, and then you can also do numrocks equals 5. You can even sort of, let me see if I can fork this. So there we go.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out how to do that either. So
it's all good. So how you fork it is like you can go up here, click on the right. Click on the title and then just fork up here. Yep. So you can do like numrocks like this. So this is perfect. So you can do like int numrocks semicolon numrocks equals 5 semicolon, or you can even do like int numrocks equals 5, and that would also be fine.
Okay, yeah, I tried that and it hadn't worked, but
yeah, it's like Java is sort of like very picky about the syntax you use. So like just make sure you don't have like spaces in your variable name, and you spell everything correctly, and then you have the semicolon at the end.
Okay, because like a div space in the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next we have like, if I remember correctly, we wanted you to sort of like declare a symbol. And from class, we talked about the characters, like the character type. So you have like string symbol equals eggplant emoji, but remember strings are first off, they aren't primitives. Also like make sure you can also like capitalize this. But the thing we were looking for was character emoji equals like whatever symbol you want. So like remember that for characters it's a single quote instead of a double quote, and you can do like hashtag or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I named that wrong. That was supposed to be symbol. But that was what we were looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I thought it was string because it was multiple letters, and character I thought was just one letter or something.
Yeah, like it was supposed to be, we were trying to like talk of like push you to like write a character, but like it's totally understandable if you thought it was supposed to be a string.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, and then
can you help me debug my code?
we're
Yeah, we don't have to go through all of this for this. I was just sort of wanted to see what I was doing wrong.
okay. This is, yeah, I think like for most of this is correct. Just remember, if you want true or false, this should be Boolean. So like,
Okay.
yeah, usually,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, usually for Booleans, the thing also is, Booleans are usually named like, is this, is that, or like,
Oh, okay. I
because
see.
they were
Yeah.
like true or false. And then for this, it would just be a double because you want a decimal for it. So doubles represent decimals in Java.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So what's the difference between a double and a float?
So doubles are basically like, so if you remember from last class, integers, doubles, and all of these numbers, they technically can't be infinite, right? Like there's a certain limit to like the largest integer you can make and the smallest integer, right?
Right.
So the difference between a double and a float is a float can represent larger digits than doubles. So they can
Okay.
represent like even bigger decimals, basically. The technical answer is that doubles and floats are different, like they have different storage size. So if I remember correctly, doubles are like 8 bits or something like that, or 1 byte large, but floats are technically the larger variable, which means they can store more data.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And can you help me debug my code right now? I can give a link to it.
Is it possible that we can do it after class? So
Okay.
that we not like, so I don't have to like show your code to everyone and we can have
I
like
thought
no
this was
downtime.
after class.
Class ends at 6, so like, can you wait 6 minutes?
Okay.
Sweet, thank you. All right, I'm gonna just skip all these beginner questions. We'll post the like slides after class. So if you want to go over them, feel free to like go over them on your free time. We have the answers in the slides. But here's also just like a bunch of different links that you can refer to for like, if you want to like know more about all the stuff we talked about during class. And then we also have like the feedback form and the submission form. So I'm gonna copy and paste in chat. So basically the general workshop is that we have this story, but we want you to sort of like, we also want you to get like user input and like whatnot. So first off, we have to like, we have to sort of create a scanner object. So how do you create one and how do you like give it the proper information? Next is like, we want you to have this scanner scan in like your friend's name and then store it in a string object. So think about like how you would declare a string variable. And then we've done the scanning for you, so you don't have to really worry about that. And then next, we just have a little bit about sort of like how do you create a string literal, and just like how you would do that. And then finally, like this is just a little bit more about like creating strings. And then also generating a random number. So what class would you import to like get a random number, and what method would you call to generate that? Yep. And then this is where you would store your random number. And that's it. So the general gist of this is like, again, we're just trying to see if you understand like the string, random, and scanner classes. If you know how to create an object, specifically like a scanner and a random object. And then finally, like if you know how to store strings properly. So any questions about this workshop? All right. And then finally, I know someone wanted to stay back and wanted help to debug their code. So I'm willing to stay behind a little and work on you with that. Otherwise, I think we're going over Booleans next week. So I'll see you guys next weekend.